Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. As always, I'm going to try to make the very, very best use of our 60 minutes together. Today, I'm going to be talking about presentation tips. Honestly, I could have made 5-hour-long sessions about presentations. So I'm really going to pack a lot in, kind of just cram it all in there. You might hear a lot of cliches, but anything you can do, if you can only, personally, I know, being an active salesperson for many, many years, I know that making small changes to what you do, especially in your presentation, is a little bit hard. I remember when I was asked to completely throw away a presentation and start with a whole new one that somebody else developed. Very difficult to do that. So I know that making changes in your presentation is not always that easy, but I'm literally going to give you 40, 50 really good ideas. And if you can take 2 or 3 of them, and then I would highly suggest that when you do your presentation, that about once a month or once every 3 weeks, you record yourself, either just record it for yourself or your office mates, or give it to me and I'll give you my feedback. But you'll see over a period of time, over 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year, how your presentation skills are getting a lot better if you focus on this particular part of the sales process. Basically, everything that I talk about in sales, in the Sales Mastermind, is really to raise your odds. I don't know that there's any such thing as a perfect salesman. I'm sure there are salespeople a lot better than I am, but I don't know that anybody's perfect. We all make mistakes. We don't close everything. But the goal is, when you gain, it's not just time in selling, it's time plus really learning some good techniques and becoming comfortable with some new phrases and some new styles. But as you start to become comfortable, you start to, what I call, even the odds. So you now have a 50-50 chance. You've closed business, but you've lost business, but you have, at least you know what you're doing. You have a little bit of a plan. And then as you keep improving in your skills, you're going to eventually raise the odds in your favor, and eventually you'll sell more than not. So one of the important things you should think about, I'm going to give you a scorecard about 10 important things that you can do to improve your sales presentation. But one of the things that's really, really good, and if you ever give a public talk, you always want to have a hook or an attention grabber. But just here's an example. I've listened to more than 100 top salespeople give their pitch, and there's one thing they all do in the beginning of the presentation that sets the customer up psychologically for the presentation. Can you guess what it is? Let me tell you. Right, that's an example of a hook or an attention grabber. Another one is, we interviewed, 50 of our top clients, and we found 4 things that were most important to them. Well, 3 of them we kind of expected, but that 4th one was really a surprise to us. You're going to really be surprised when you hear it. Then you start your pitch. Here's the first thing, the second thing, the third thing. They're in. Give them a reason to listen. Just think about it. It's just something you can add to your presentation, just to grab their attention, get them focused on you for a little bit. So there are 3 psychological goals. Everything about sales is all about the customer's mindset. It's about customer psychology. Okay, James, I'll remind me later. I'll get to that question. So the psychological goals of your presentation are 3. Number 1, you have to develop trust through your presentation, which means credibility, believability. If you have watched the other workshops about the opening the call and building trust and credibility, which is all we talk about, listening. If you do that right, if you're really, really good at questioning and needs development, psychologically, the customer is already going to trust you. So the presentation can only ruin it, right? Because they already trust you. They trust you enough to give you a few more minutes to, give your pitch or say what it is you want to say. So they already trust you and like you and are allowing time to share. So you have to build your presentation so that it has elements of trust built into it. You can't just leave it to chance. You have to specifically mention trust, talk about trust. Here's why our customers trust us. Let me tell you this story about trust. So that's really, really one of the really important elements of your presentation. You have to build trust. Number 2, you have to build certainty. At the end of the presentation, you have to leave them without the loophole, with the shop around loophole. And if that's something that you get stuck with all the time, we got to shop around, got to get more quotes, then you have to build that into your presentation so that at the end of the presentation, I'm not going to say they'll never say we need to shop around or we need to think about it. It happens. But the truth is, you did your job. You tried to make sure that your presentation included elements that built certainty. and that, yep, this is the right solution for you. There's absolutely no doubt about it. You could shop around forever. In fact, let's shop around together and let me show you the pluses and minuses of other people's solution. You have to build this psychological certainty. And finally, probably the most important goal of your presentation is you have to build curiosity. You have to get them to ask questions because, and I did this out of order, but when we did the workshop on closing, we talked about using questions as the pivot to the close. So literally at the end, you need them to ask questions. If they don't ask questions, that means they're not that interested. They're not curious. And as soon as they're interested and curious, as soon as you see the buying signs towards the end of your presentation, that's when it's time to shut up and pivot to the close. And there's a whole nother workshop on that. So those are the three things you should be building into your presentation. All right. So what we do is, again, this is the middle of the process. The beginning of the process is we introduce ourselves. They tell us that we're not interested. We figure out how to get around that. We ask them a bunch of questions. But the key to giving a good presentation is to make sure that it hits the mark. And the only way your presentation is going to hit the mark is if you were listening to what they were telling you. Your customer's not interested in every feature of your product. They're interested in the features that are going to help them. I mean, this is, like I say, they're going to hear a lot of cliches here, but you have to do a good job of understanding who you're talking to, why they're listening to you, what their problems are, and how you honestly can solve them. So you've got to pivot from that kind of open part of the conversation where you're emptying yourself, you're letting the customer run the show, you're asking them questions, they're answering all your questions, they're doing all the talking. You have to then pivot into the presentation. So I like things that are easy and soft and don't feel uncomfortable for me. So I just summarize. Okay, so let me make sure I heard you right. You've got this problem and this problem. You think the root cause of that problem is this. And because you have this problem, you're losing $1 million a year in your business, right? Am I right? Yep. Okay, great. Do you mind if I share some things that I think might help? Or another way to wrap up the question sequence is just say, well, I really appreciate all the information you've given me. Honestly, you've filled in a lot of the details for me. That's really, really helpful. It makes your situation really clear, and that's really going to, help us get to the point in the presentation. Do you mind if I share that with you now? Well, of course not. And why would they mind? Because you've been listening to them. And again, we're assuming that you're doing a good job in the other phases. All right, so I'm going to give you a 10-point scorecard. I'm going to be posting this video on YouTube, like all the other workshops, so you can go back to it in a couple of days, and you can get this scorecard, or you can take notes now. The key is you want to record yourself. The best way to improve in selling, the best way, bar none, not reading a book, not watching a video, not going to a workshop. The best way to improve your selling is to record yourself. And what multiplies the power of recording is when you let other people listen to it and critique it. So for anybody, I'll throw the gauntlet down for anybody that wants to record their sales pitch or their presentation or their whole sales call. I'm going to say this out loud. I will donate $100 to your favorite charity if you give me a usable recording that I can use and permission to use it as training, and I'll pick it apart for you, and your level of expertise will accelerate. And you really also get better listening to other people and listening to how they either do things right or make mistakes. Very, very helpful if we can start to share information. We can run entire workshops just listening to your sales recordings. So I'm going to give you a 10-point scorecard, and I want you to record yourself as soon as possible after this presentation, and then in 3 or 4 weeks again, 3 or 4 weeks after that. Just make it a habit to do it. It's a habit you will not regret. Okay, so the first thing is what I already mentioned. Do you have an attention-grabbing statement? Have you created interest throughout? That's really, really, really important. If you ever notice, if you watch all these crime shows, you'll notice that the murder is the first scene is always the murder. And that's the reason why you're watching the rest of the show, right? You saw this murder and now they're going to solve it. Movies are a little bit different, but TV shows are all the same. Murder up front, the crisis up front, and now I'm going to solve it. You have to generate interest in the beginning. Otherwise, there's no why. Like, why am I really listening? When I talk about creating interest throughout, do as I'm going to tell you, not as I personally do, because I don't have this particular gene. Think about the difference, as somebody once told me, think about the difference as when you were, a kid reading a picture book or at story time versus in high school or college reading a textbook. You would much rather read a story. You'd much rather hear somebody tell you a story. It's just much more interesting if you can make it visual, if you can really appeal to more senses than just their intellect. I'm a very verbal person. I'm not too creative, so I'm not the best at this. I guess I'm up to PowerPoint. That's a big improvement for me. But you have to create interest throughout. And I think that's obvious. Otherwise, what's the point? Why are they listening? Right. And I don't mean just interest in solving their problem. I mean interest in wanting to hear you speak. So again, if you record yourself, you can ask yourself, would I want to listen to myself for 10 or 15 minutes? What am I doing? What can I do in the beginning of my presentation? What can I do to throw some fun things in there? Fun facts, make a joke, something. Try to create interest throughout your presentation. Did you frame the conversation in the beginning? Before I start, let me tell you what I'm going to cover. I learned one of the greatest lessons I ever learned. I think I was 26 years old. I was working for AT&T, and I happened to work in the semiconductor division of AT&T many, many, many years ago when we were, salespeople and marketing people. And they hired this real hotshot vice president from AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, and he was going to come and run the semiconductor division of AT&T. And so he had all of us young guys, because we would travel the country giving our presentation and selling, and he had all of us stand up there and give our presentation. Well, in those days, it was a projector with the lamp on the wall. This was like in the Fred Flintstone days. And so I had my slides ready and everyone had theirs. There were like 20 of us, and our managers were sitting behind us. It was a giant U-shaped table at AT&T, a big conference room, and we had to give our presentation. Well, the first guy, I felt so bad for him because he put his thing up there. The very first slide was the organization structure of AT&T. I report to this guy, this department is that department. And this guy, his name was Dick Cotel from AMD. He stood up and he says, "What the fuck is that?" And I'm looking like, that's my first slide too. It's like the AT&T organization chart. And he said, "People don't want to hear about you. They want to hear about," so it's like he goes on, "Well, what is the first slide?" Someone has the nerve to ask him the question, "What should the first slide be?" He said, "An agenda. Here are the things I'm going to cover, but Mr. Customer, what's most important to you? I don't want to cover everything if you don't care about it. What's most important to you?" And that launched a conversation. So when I started using an agenda in the beginning, we would get invited. We were AT&T, big company. So we would get invited, everyone in a conference room. And instead of throwing up the organization chart, I threw up an agenda, and that opened it up for questions for days. I could have stayed there and asked questions and had this open conversation for hours, and it gets them to talk. So you want to frame the conversation in the beginning. Here's what I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to particularly talk about the things that relate to you and I believe are going to help you solve some of the problems that we've talked about. The other thing I want you to do in the beginning, especially, and this is pretty much for everybody, we all get the same objections, but the toughest ones are when the fish wiggles off the hook, is they should have bought, but they have to think about it, or send me the information, call me in 2 weeks, got to talk to somebody else. I call it blocking the exit ramps. And the beginning of the presentation is the best time for you to psychologically block those exit ramps. So you might want to say things like, most people, when they hear this, most people, if their wife isn't there, they're going to tell me later that they need to talk to the wife. So before we start, I want you to pretend that you're your wife, and I want you to tell me all the things that she would like and not like about what we're going to talk about, right? Try to block that objection. I need to think about it. I've been doing this for many, many years, and I got to tell you, Paula, the truth is there are 3 outcomes to this call. You're either going to move forward with us and join the family, you're going to say no, or you're going to tell me you need to think about it. So let's just eliminate the third one and just tell me yes or no. Is that fair? Fair. Frame the conversation in the beginning. And if you continually get stuck with objections, if you're perhaps not maybe strong on the close, or maybe not really good at building trust in the beginning, if you're still struggling with losing too many at the end, then try to block the exit ramps. Are they still going to crash through the exit ramps? Yes, they're adults. They're not signing a legal contract. They're still going to want to talk to their wife. They're still going to say they want to think about it. But I did my job by trying to block those exit ramps. And then there are tactics you can use after that, Like, wait a minute, I'm a little confused because 15 minutes ago you told me you didn't need your wife in the room. Now you tell me you do. You can play that game too, but at least you tried to block the exit ramps. And that's really, really important in the beginning of the conversation. It actually will help your closing rate because you're going to block some of those objections. As I listen to your presentation, or when you record your presentation, as you listen to it yourself, you want to kind of gauge yourself. Are you talking about features? Are you talking about features and benefits? Or are you really coming back to value for the customer and real solutions? This is really important. Everyone knows what a feature is. You know, you open the hood of the car and they say, you know, it's got a 2.6 liter V8 engine. That's a feature. The benefit is, look, man, you're buying this car for your daughter. What that means, what this 2.6 liter engine means, is when she's trying to merge on the highway, she's going to press on the gas and she's going to be able to merge right into traffic. She's going to have a lot of confidence when she drives. It's a safety thing. The value, it could save her life. The power of this engine could save her life in certain driving situations. So features, benefits, value. And you really need to, as you listen to your own presentation, you need to just judge for yourself or send it to me and I'll judge. I used to be an umpire, so I don't mind hurting your feelings. I will tell you exactly, look, man, you're stuck on features. You're going to need to move. You need to become a value seller. And we talked in another workshop specifically about how to build value versus talking about the solution, how I'm going to solve your problem versus talking about the product specifically. Okay, the key difference between benefits and value. Would anyone like to take a shot at that? Anybody? Okay. So what I would say the difference between benefits and value, okay? So I'm very experienced at selling health insurance, okay? So the insurance I sell is a PPO, not an HMO. So if that's too technical for you, an HMO means you have to go to their doctors, the doctors the insurance company picks out. A PPO means you can go to any doctor that you choose. So the feature is a PPO versus an HMO. The benefit is that you can go to any doctor you want. The value is it could save your life. And I've seen circumstances where it does save your life, where if you have a certain type of cancer, you're not stuck with the local county hospital. You can go to any cancer center in the country. That could save your life. Do you see how that could save your life, James? That's value. There's a difference between feature, benefits, and then one level up is value, how it really solves their problem or how it satisfies a need or a want that they have. Would anybody else like to chime in with their thoughts on that? One of the things, I'm just reading some notes and want to make sure I cover everything that I had notes on here. One of the big things that I emphasize in anytime I give a presentation is people are, I don't know, is the word simple or, simple minded. I don't know what it is, but they want simple things. So I could talk for 20 minutes, but when I get to the points that I want to emphasize, I say, look, here's the one thing I want you to remember, right? Not that it's a PPO or an HMO, not all the 5,000 things I said. Here's the one thing that you need to know about this thing that I'm selling you. Here's the, Paul, I think you said, you sell like bath enclosures and things like that. Here's the one, here's the one thing I need you to know, whether you're selling to a contractor, here's the one thing I need you to know as a contractor. We will supply this, right? You could tell them a million things, but what's the one thing? And then 2 minutes later, I say, here's the one thing. All right. The second thing, I joke around, the second thing I want you to remember, right? And you really want to highlight the important points and make sure that if they remember nothing else, they remember you telling them the most important points. You always want to talk about unique and different. If you're the same as everybody else, you're just the same as everybody else. What makes you, your company, your product, your solution, your service, your warranty? What is it about you that makes you unique and different? Anytime a company hires me to consult with them to help their salespeople, the first thing I do is I work with the company to try to understand what's unique and different about the company. And then that becomes the ammunition for the sales point. That literally becomes like the pivot points that they can pivot off. Because look, you could buy this anywhere, right? You could buy a bath enclosure at Home Depot, right? I can buy what you sell anywhere. What's unique and different about you? That's what your presentation has to get across. Unique and different. That's what that you have to do that. All right. Number 4, if I'm listening to a recording of your presentation, how well are you using stories, references, and validations? I told you the thing about stories. A children's story is much more interesting than reading a textbook, right? Watching a movie is much more interesting than reading a book. Visual stories. Stories are very, very powerful. Stories about somebody similar, stories about whatever you know what I'm talking about. And hopefully you have 2, 3, 4, 5 stories. If you're brand new, I used to train, new health insurance agents. So use my stories. I had to cut my manager, he had a customer, that had this and they had, cancer diagnosis, didn't have a penny out of his pocket, went to, Seattle, Washington to some famous cancer center to save their child's life. Use the stories because stories are really psychologically very important. References are different. References are more like testimonials, right? What other people have thought about your product. They've made the leap of faith. They've moved into the unknown. They've trusted me and bought from me. And you know what? This was their experience. That's why testimonials are so powerful. And if you're not using testimonials and stories in your presentation, you get a point off because it's just, you can be a lot more powerful with those in there. And validation's a little bit different. If you're in a market where you do have validation, car dealers use this all the time, rated #1 on JD Power, 5 years in a row, blah, 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 best, best restaurant in such and such county. That's validation. That's third-party validation. So if you have it, flaunt it. Like Bruno Mars says, if you got it, flaunt it. If you're freaky, then own it. If you have references and validation, then use it because it's really psychologically important. Remember, I told you trust, certainty, and curiosity. That builds trust and certainty. Enthusiasm. This is gigantic. All right. I'm going to take I'm going to unshare the screen here for a second so I can show you this, right? In my opinion, if a customer is going to take his wallet out of his pocket, if he's going to, sign a contract or, write a check for 10,000, whatever it is that I'm selling, if he's going to take his wallet out of his pocket and give me his credit card, I figure he's got to be about a 9 or a 10, right? That would make sense. He's got to be about a 9 or a 10. If I'm a 6 or a 7, I can't sell the guy. You just can't sell. If I can't expect anybody else to believe in what I'm selling, if I myself am not completely sold on it, if I don't think it's the most important thing in the world, this is what you got to understand. When you're selling something, you have to be selling something that you believe will absolutely benefit the other person. If you're selling yourself and you're selling your own services, look, man, I'm 1,000% sure that you're going to be better off. I'm enthusiastic enough for both of us because if I'm not a 10, if I'm a 10, well, I don't know how I'm going to try to get him to a 9 or a 10 and close the sale. But if I'm a 10 and I can't get him above a 5 or 6 or 7, I might not make the sale. It's enthusiasm, belief in what you're doing. Here's the way I sell. Okay. When somebody says no to me, or even if I'm just talking to them the first time, I don't mean to say I only use this at the end. I picture the person in a burning house. I call this the dude statement. Dude, you got to come out of the house. You got to come out of the house. You got to get out of there. Well, no, I'm okay. No, you're not okay. You got to come out of there. I've got to show you this. I have to help you. I have to move you into a better situation. This mindset of the burning house. And of course, I say this only when they're super, super qualified, right? If they're not qualified, that's a whole different conversation. If they're not qualified, I'm not giving them their presentation, right? But I have to get you out of the house. You have to come and do this. You have to join. You have to, because if you have that mentality, then it's much easier at the end not to take no for an answer and not feel uncomfortable with it. Like, wait, come on, dude, stop playing around. You're going to do this. You have to do this. You just told me you have this problem, this problem, this problem. You've got to get out of that burning house. So enthusiasm is the critical element. I think it's been said, that sales is nothing more than a transfer of enthusiasm. And I believe that. And I'm a pretty low key guy, but if I see that you're resisting a little bit, you got to get out of there. Nope, No's not a good answer. If I don't like the way the sale is going, I shift my gears and I got to pull them out of the house with me. I'm not going to let them stay in a burning house. The next point in the scorecard, and I really do suggest that you give yourself a grade. You record yourself and give yourself a grade and share it with all of us. Are you starting the presentation and are you ending the presentation with very clear expectations? One of the worst things you can do, and I mean the worst thing you can do in sales, is to end with, so what's the next step? Where you're asking the customer, what do you want to do next? Well, it's not selling. It's a terrible way to be. You have to set, especially at the end, you have to set very clear expectations. I use this to close. Here's what we're going to do next, right? We're going to do this, this, and this. Then we're going to do that. With your permission, let's go ahead and get the first step done right now. Let's get the contract signed and we'll go ahead and get you scheduled for the onboarding, whatever it is you do, right? Especially at the end, set very, very clear expectations of the next step. Do not leave anything to them and do not leave anything to your imagination. And I don't mean this in a way that's pushy. I mean it in a way that you will suffer and struggle by chasing people forever unless you set clear expectations. Even when you set clear expectations, people still will try to wiggle their way out of it and, soften up and not really follow through. One of a couple of just really, really good phrases that you can use is if you're not going to close them on that call, if you're, this is just not the call that's going to happen and you've got to follow up with them, then say, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a call on Thursday or Friday, or let's say Thursday, right? Just follow my own advice. I'm going to give you a call on Thursday afternoon and here's your homework assignment. I'm going to do this. You're going to look into this. Then the email after the meeting says, remember your homework assignment, do this, right? One of the greatest phrases I ever heard as a CEO of my health insurance company, whenever he asks you to do something, he always follows it up with, can I count on you to do that? Here's what I need you to do. I need you to do this, this, and this. Is that clear? Do you understand what I'm asking you to do? Yup. Can I count on you to do that? Yes, sir. You can count on me. And that little extra nail in the coffin gets me to actually do what I promised I would do. Never leave a call. I don't think you should start a call without framing it. I talked about framing the conversation in the beginning and setting the exit. Here's what we're going to talk about. Does that agenda look good to you? That's how you do it at the start. At the end, you must, if I'm telling you, I've seen people do it over and over again. How did you leave it? Oh, I'm going to give them a call next week. What day? I don't know. And I'm not big on, this day at this time. I'll just deviate here for a minute. When I set appointments, I don't set appointments for specific times. I set appointments. You're going to be my first call in the morning tomorrow. I'm going to call you before I break for lunch tomorrow. I'm going to call you when I get back from lunch. I'm going to call you middle of the afternoon. I'm going to call you at the end of the day. And I don't worry about people taking my call because I spend a lot of time and energy building trust and a relationship so that when I call them, if they actually are not there, okay, there's a good excuse. I don't worry about it. But I do set clear expectations. You must do that. Otherwise, you'll get swallowed up with constant follow-up, and then you'll just end up turning over and going to another job. Another thing, during the presentation, I want to hear you using check-ins and trial closes. Does that make sense? I covered before I jump into the next thing, I just want to make sure. Do you have any questions about what I just talked about? Give them information in bite-sized bits. In the book, The Big Book of Sales, I call it the 45-second rule. I've heard other people say a minute and a half. I say just don't ever, when you hear yourself talking, when you feel yourself like I've gone on a little bit too long, just stop and say, does that make sense? Am I on target here? Is that kind of match up? Because remember I mentioned this. That's why I'm talking about this. Makes any questions for me? Trial close is slightly different. Does that all sound good? Does that sound good so far? Is that something you'd be interested in if we could solve that problem? Those are called trial close questions. They're really easy. They're not rocket science. You can look in the book, The Big Book of Sales. I have 50 trial close questions, just slightly different variations of exactly what I just said. But you have to become comfortable doing the check-ins and the trial close throughout the process. And if you don't, minus a point, because if you're not doing that, then all you're doing is talking for 3 minutes or 8 minutes or 20 minutes. And that's not what a presentation should be. It really should be, one way in the beginning, you listening to them, you asking great questions, them giving you tons of information, permission to pivot into the presentation. And now the presentation would be a little bit. Is that okay? Does that make sense so far? Give them another breadcrumb. Stop. Was that good? Another one. Yep. How's that sound so far? Yeah, all good so far. What else are we going to need to cover? Let them tell you, right? Don't make it just one way broadcast. And here's another one. Are they comfortable? Are they laughing? Are they trusting you? Or are they just sitting there mindlessly listening to you, not really listening to you, right? It's your job to make them comfortable. It's not their job to connect with you. It's your job to connect with them. It's your job to read the room. It's your job to make sure they understand what you're talking about, that you're talking at the right level, that they're still qualified. All of this is important. You have to constantly make sure that they're engaged, they're liking you, and most importantly, that they're trusting you, that they're believing what you're saying, that you're speaking with credibility. Do you get them physically involved? And if you can't get them physically involved, are you helping them visualize and helping them? I call it future tensing, right? Imagine, if I'm a remodeler and I'm going to, redesign somebody's, let's say I sell windows, imagine looking out this window. I mean, here it is now, but when you have your new windows, it's going to be double framed, wider. I mean, it's going to be beautiful. Get them, help them to visualize. If they're physically involved, what I mean by that is one time, many, many, many years ago, I did a training for a friend of mine, and he owned 3 carpet stores. And we got his salespeople at 7 a.m. We got them from all 3 stores. And basically what I said to them is, your job is to get the husband and the wife on their hands and knees touching the carpet. Honey, feel this one. Oh, look at this one, or this tile, feel that sheen on the linoleum. Whatever you're selling, if you can, get them physically involved. If you sell vacuum cleaners, pour dirt on the floor, let them do the vacuuming. Doesn't do any good if you do it. That doesn't help them. It doesn't connect them to the product. Get them physically involved. But for most of us now who do not sell physical products, you need to help them visualize. If you're selling something, Paul, I'm going to pick on you again. If you're selling something to, handyman or home remodeling contractors or people that do bathroom remodels, help them visualize the ordering process, help them visualize the delivery process. Tell them it's going to be in a box this big, it's going to be in 5 boxes, whatever. Help them visualize it and help them explain. In insurance, I threw in words all the time, like, in order to best protect you, to make sure that you're safe if this would ever happen. That's future tensing. And I always would say, fast forward, just take time and fast forward 6 months and imagine you, or God forbid, one of your children, let's say one of your children plays sports and breaks a leg. Here's how your insurance will work. Right? One of them is just features. You can go to any doctor, you can go to any hospital. It's going to cover 25% of this, 100% of that. Those are features. When I tell you a story, when I help you visualize, let's fast forward 6 months. You guys are on vacation and your son, breaks his leg. Or you told me your daughter does cheerleading. Let's say she gets injured in cheerleading. You're going to put her in the car and you're going to take her to the emergency room. Here's how your insurance will operate. Or if the ambulance comes, here's how the insurance will operate. Always help them understand. Huge psychological pin that you need to put in them is they have to know what it's going to be like in the future. And finally, do you customize to their personality? There are many different types of buying personalities. I believe there are 4 main ones. One of them is, the boss, the guy who's just in charge. He has to be the control person. The other is the opposite. They're the social person. They just want to know that you like them, that they like you. They'll do business with anybody as long as you make them laugh. There's the social person. There's the analytical person, the guy that needs all the spreadsheets and the data. And then there's the team person. How's this going to affect our team energy? Are we going to be okay with this new thing? Like, they don't like change. Well, nobody likes change, but these people, I call them energetic people. They're always worried about how this is going to affect my process. How's this going to affect us in the future? So you can't sell the same way to everybody. And you really have to, this is kind of an advanced skill, but honestly, it really makes a lot of sense. If you show charts to a social person who just wants to laugh, you're turning them off. If you tell jokes to the person that needs to see the graphs and the charts, you're turning them off. If you're not allowing the control person to be in control of the process, you're not really going to be able to sell them. You can't sell them because they need to be in control. If you pull control away from them, they pull back from you. So you have to really learn how to sell to different personalities. And what I do, or what you can do, is you can give a tidbit to each one. You can say, you know what I love about, this job? You know what I love about selling this product? You're really in control. You get to decide what you want. And you know what I really love? We have all the charts and the graphs to back them up. And you know what I really love? To the social person, so many famous people have already done this. Your neighbor down the street, this person, that person. I had a family where you remind me of this person. They were hilarious, just like you. And they bought my insurance too. And then you say, how's this going to impact your process? So you can literally throw a tidbit to each of these four personalities to make sure, again, it's an advanced skill. And if you do that, if you're actually customizing to their personality, you're way ahead of the game. Very advanced salesperson. And there are people who just have a natural tendency to be able to do this. They just seem to be able to do that without really having to think about it. They just read other people, and they just know how to coddle a person's personality. The most important thing about your presentation, more important than anything else, is it has to hit the mark for the customer. It has to address their issues, not anybody's issues, but their specific issues. If you don't do that, they're not engaged. They're not going to be curious. They're not even going to be interested. In any presentation, like I say, do as I say, not as I do. In any presentation, short is better. You don't have to tell people everything. Long and confusing is bad. It psychologically checks people out. And in order to be shorter in your presentation, don't rush through it. That's another big mistake. Just cut stuff out. Just don't tell them everything. And most importantly, is towards the end, when you hear the buying sign, that's interesting. I could see how that would work. Do you see how that would work? Yeah, I actually do see how that would work. How would you do this in your situation? Let them say something. As soon as you hear the buying signs, ask them, stop the presentation. And as I talked about in the close, open it up for questions and pivot into your close. We always close on questions because questions are a very strong sign of interest, and let them draw their own positive conclusions. My theory is not everybody says yes to me by a long shot, but when a person says no, for whatever reason, and I took 3-4 swings at it, called them back, still couldn't get them. I failed. It's not their fault. I just didn't connect with them for whatever reason. But I know when they're saying no, that they know in their own head they should have said yes, that they're turning something down that would have helped them. I was going to put them into a better situation. I was going to solve their problem. I was going to help them. And for whatever reason, they couldn't get past whatever fears they had, and I couldn't help them get past their fears. So it's my fault. But for whatever reason, I know that I did my job as best I could, and I just lost the sale. But I do know that they feel bad, and that gives me some small pleasure. So let me just tell you very briefly about the Sales Mastermind Association. We're an industry association. We don't represent the sales industry. We represent our members, but our goal as an association is to create a much more positive narrative for the sales profession. I'm personally tired over the last 15 years of hearing all the negativity and beast mode, and you're just not working hard enough, and get here earlier, stay later. That's nonsense. Sales is not a numbers game. Sales is not a pressure game. Sales is a connection game. It's learning how to connect with another human being and build a pathway of trust. So we want to build trust. We want to talk about trust-based selling, and we want to build a much more positive narrative for the sales profession, both for the world at large looking at salespeople, and also for salespeople who either want to get into the profession or who are very frustrated and high stressed as salespeople. We want to create a much more positive environment for salespeople built essentially on trust-based selling. The second thing, and this is the most important thing to me because this is about saving humanity, we are preserving inside the association the nearly extinct but vitally important skill of listening, and listening leads to building trust. I used to say 90% of people don't listen. I'm telling you now, it's 95%. I hardly hear anybody who actually listens and empathetically acknowledges what the other person's saying. I'm talking about parents. I used to be an umpire. I coached my, son's sports teams for a decade. And then I was an umpire for 8 more years after that. I hear parents talking to their children, parents talking to other parents. Salespeople. I've listened to countless calls. Hardly anybody actually knows how to listen. And so inside the mastermind, there is a very specific 6-part course on listening, and we're preserving it not just for salespeople, but for parents and managers and business owners and doctors and lawyers and accountants and nurses. Anybody who does a job needs to learn how to listen. It's literally the only way as a species that we're going to, create a better future for ourselves. We have to learn how to connect with one another and build trust. And listening is the foundation of trust. The third element of the association is I personally do not believe that anybody in the world, there are probably, I don't know, 500 million people, maybe even 1 billion people, depending on how you define it, who sell for a living, who don't eat if they don't make money. All over the world, there's hundreds of millions of people like that. I would think it would be a terrible idea to force them to pay for training. I put everything that I have on YouTube. I don't hold anything back. I do hold a few things back that are more psychological based for my members, but for the public, we provide free high quality sales training as an association. We'll continue to post this stuff on YouTube. Anybody in the world can have it. Anybody in the world, regardless of sexual orientation, race, nationality, language, I don't care who you are. If you want to sign up for this sales training, it's free. I'm never going to charge for it. And as an association member, these are the things that you're actually paying your dues, a small amount of dues, but this is what your dues is going for: creating a positive narrative for sales, preserving the skill of listening and spreading it and promoting it, and providing free high quality sales training to the world. For our members, and you do not have to be a salesperson to become a member of our association, we explore the power of mind to not only make ourselves better salespeople, but to make ourselves better people internally. And as you understand, if you do work with mind and you work I wrote another book called The Cycle of Mind. When you start working with the thought matrix and you start really building change in yourself over a period of weeks and months and possibly years, you realize that everything in your life changes. Everything comes from the way you perceive it. And so our job is to really work with the tools of mind to uncover happiness and abundance on our life paths. So thank you. That's what I wanted to talk about today regarding giving better presentations.